Alrighty, hello everyone. Thank you for joining our February Demand Trends webinar today. As always, we're going to cover updates on job postings, Google search trends, and completions, along with a look at the fall 2025 new student enrollment figures. With so much discussion around demographic shifts and the enrollment cliff, we're going to focus a little bit on how that data is actually playing out. Think of this as a sneak peek into our masterclass series, which is launching next month, where we'll go even deeper into these themes. A couple of quick housekeeping notes before we begin. Today's session is being recorded, and we will share the recording and slides afterwards. If questions come up, please drop them in the Q&A box as we go. We will answer as many as we can live, save some for the end, and if we don't get to yours, someone from our team may follow up directly. With that, I'm happy to introduce Bob Atkins, CEO and founder of Gray Decision Intelligence. Bob, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Regan, and welcome everyone. Today is indeed Demand Trends and Cliff Skeptics Day. So let me get on with business. So we'll talk a little bit at the beginning about what is a program evaluation system. That's our core business. Then we'll give you a sneak peek into the masterclass and what I call the roiling 20s and what's likely to be going on out there over the next few years. We'll give you some student demand indicators on current information. Similarly, we'll do that for employment. And then we'll come to the program of the month and show you some information about physics that may surprise you. So what is a program evaluation system? As I mentioned, I think we're the only folks who really do a full program evaluation system. It includes data on markets, student demand, employment, competition, and degree fit. It has information on margins. Do programs make or lose money? And it has data on the academic performance of those programs. Are students graduating? Are they failing courses? Are they stumbling in some other way that's inconsistent with the academic standards of the institution? And last but most important is mission, which really ties all these things together. And you may really wonder, if I'm a not-for-profit, why do I care about those margins? Isn't that kind of a for-profit mindset? And unfortunately, the world is such that no margins, no mission. So you do have to keep an eye on those margins in order to make sure that you can fund your mission. But you don't have to have a one-dimensional view of that. Margins are there to accomplish your mission. If there are programs and courses that are critical to your mission that don't make money, you just need to make sure that there are other courses and programs that make enough money to pay for them. So it's normal to have cross subsidies. It's not inappropriate, and mission is what is the final cut. If it's losing money, it's not appropriate for your mission, and the markets are no good, probably time to step aside from a program. But honestly, in our experience, there are very few of those at any given institution. So to make those decisions about which programs to start, stop, or grow, you need to not only have the right data, you need to engage the right people. Then you need to give them that information and put them in a session that we typically do workshops, but create a process where they have the opportunity to evaluate that information and discuss it as a group. There is no shortcut for this. You can't hothouse it. There's no algorithm that will tell you what programs you should start or grow. You really do need a participative process and judgment from your faculty and administrators in order to make sound program decisions and get them implemented. And then comes the often untended to part of program evaluation and management, which is the manage part. People tend to want to do program evaluation and management and do the evaluation and step away from it for 3 to 5 years. And there was a time when that was fine. The world wasn't changing that fast. That's not the case anymore. Student interests change very quickly. Job markets change very quickly. And the academic content of programs has to change quickly to keep up with what's going on in the world these days. So you have to manage programs much more actively than it was necessary in the past. I would suggest you need to look at every program at this sort of existential level of start, stop, or grow about once a year. Now, 90% of those things are going to be the same at the end of the year. But at the margin, you're going to change a few things. And that's terribly important to keep your program portfolio healthy and aligned with markets and margins. So, and not to mention your mission. So keep that in mind. Historically, that's been very difficult because people had to manually assemble the information they needed on markets, for example, every time they'd had to do the program management and review of programs. And that took a lot of time, and doing it once a year is just impractical. But once you automate all that information, it's actually very easy to take a look once a year. and figure out whether a program needs special attention or not. And as I mentioned, most don't, but some do, and you need to find those before they start to either be under-resourced or consume more resources than is warranted. So that's a little bit about program evaluation. That's what we support, and you'll see towards the end of this data directly out of our program evaluation system about a program, and that'll give you an idea of the data you need in order to make a good decision, in particular about markets for a program. Now, let's take a look at the Roiling 20s, the subject of Masterclass 1. And the first thing we've all heard about in this context is the enrollment cliff. It comes from Graw's book and this startling chart that shows the world essentially ending in 2029. You can see the line running up, and then right about now, it starts to fall, and then the fall accelerates through 2029. That's kind of scary. Also not helpful. Why is it not helpful? Because I look at this and I say, okay, there's really nothing I can do. All I can do is weep, gnash my teeth, and hope to find some sort of an escape valve, get another career, or leave higher ed entirely. So, that's not very useful, I guess is what I would say. It also happens to be questionable. So let's just take this chart. You notice it starts at 3,800,000 18-year-olds, not zero. Well, what does it look like if you just take the same exact data and start the chart at zero? I don't know about you, that doesn't look like a cliff to me. I'm over here. Yeah, it's going down. In Graw's numbers, it goes down about 3.8% annually. That is actually a less steep slope than the bunny slope on a ski mountain. Now, they're not really completely analogous, but let's put it this way, you're not cliff jumping here. At most, you're on a green slope. Now, let's also think that it's missing 30% of US students. That is all of international and all adult learners. So if there's going to be a cliff, what we've got here is a very incomplete view of the population of people who might want to go to college. So that's part of the problem. It's actually not a cliff, it's a slope, it's a headwind. And it's a headwind amongst a subset of students that excludes almost 30% of the actual market for higher ed. Then there's one other problem. As we look at the more current census data, it turns out the forecast was incorrect that Graw did. And right now, if you look at census data about how many 18-year-olds there'll be, it is declining, but it's declining at a little bit less than, well, a little bit over, less than half as fast as Graw anticipated. So it is a decline. It's about a 1.6% decline per year. Again, more like a bunny slope than a cliff. Then you have to say, well, actually, if I knew the number of 18-year-olds, would that do a good job of predicting enrollment? And it turns out it doesn't. So here I'm going to give you an example of adult students, age 25 and older, and what happens when the unemployment rate changes. So first, just notice the blue bars, which is enrollment, which peaked in 2011 and then began a gradual decline. If I go back a chart, I shouldn't do this, you'll notice that all through this period, there wasn't there's really no trend, if you will, in the number of 18-year-olds. So whatever was happening to 18-year-olds, it wasn't causing the shifts that we're seeing on this chart, not correlated. And so we go through this and you see that here where the unemployment rate was, let me get this right in my axes, unemployment rate was going down. We see basically flat enrollment over that time period, up 300,000, so maybe 5%. Then unemployment spiked, and we added 1 million students in higher ed, adult learners specifically. Unemployment stayed high. We added a few 100,000 more students. And then this is the Obama administration. You see this long, slow, painful decline in the unemployment rate. And it really, I remember it well. And that was a very tough time psychologically for many of us because it wasn't a snap recovery from a recession. It took a long time to dig our way out. But as the unemployment rate declined, you can see that enrollment in higher ed by adult learners declined. And that explains a great deal of the overall decline in higher ed enrollment. They made a brief spike during COVID in unemployment, but it didn't really have an impact. A slight decline here, so a little bit counter to my argument. And then unemployment dropped, and we see another drop in enrollment. So my assertion is that if you're trying to understand enrollment in higher ed, the change in the unemployment rate is a much more compelling indicator than the change in demographics within reason. I mean, if you're in Korea, South Korea, that is, the number of 18-year-olds has dropped 30-40% and will drop a total of 70% during this forecast period. So that's a cliff. If that's happening, then yes, the demographics matter. But with these kinds of minor declines, actually the economy may matter more. And as we'll see here, unemployment is a very good predictor of enrollment. So on this chart, we can see unemployment falling and unemployment rising, and these numbers show you the percentage change. And on the vertical axis, we can see the change in fall enrollment from -2 to +8. So as we move from lower left to upper right, the unemployment rate is rising and enrollment is rising. So in this whole quadrant here, we see that all the dots are in fact where they ought to be. Unemployment is rising and enrollment is rising. In this quadrant, we can see unemployment falling and all the dots are doing what they're supposed to do, and they're below the line. So enrollment is falling when unemployment falls. And we have a couple of outliers here that are not doing what they're supposed to, but that's almost always true in an analytic. Here, we've got some enrollment falling in a couple of years where enrollment rose despite a decline in the unemployment rate. So I always have to watch the double negatives there. In any case, on an annual basis, this has an R-squared of about 75%. That means it explains about 75% of the variation in enrollment is explained by the change in the unemployment rate. When we ran that same number for demographics, we found it explained about 7% of the variation. So if you're trying to anticipate what's going to happen in your local market, keep an eye on the unemployment rate. It's a very good indicator of what's likely to happen to enrollment. So let's switch over and go into demand. And I think hopefully all of you can take a little sigh of relief and say, I don't have to be as concerned about the cliff as I used to be. That's a headwind. It's not dispositive. It's not a reason why your enrollment should decline. So Google keywords. What I want to do first is just explain how to read the chart. The black lines are 2023, the medium blue is 2024, and the light blue is 2025. And this is Google search volumes for over 900 programs. Those programs represent about 90% of all US completions. So as we move into this, in the first half of the year, demand was up. Google searches were up 21%. As we look at the second half of the year, not so much. Google searches over this period declined 13%. Now, there's an important caveat here. Right in here is when we began to see a fundamental change in how search is done, shifting from keywords to AI-driven search. So my assertion would be that this decline is probably explained by the shift in search technologies, not so much an actual decline in interest in higher ed. Though, frankly, you can't really tell whether the interest declined over the period. When you put all this together, total Google search volume during last year is basically flat year over year, down 0.1%. But again, a little bit of uncertainty here about the trend, whether that's an underlying trend in student interest or just a shift in student search behavior. So what were people looking for? I found one program here that's surprised me several months in a row. I guess after a while, it shouldn't surprise me anymore. Aviation aerospace. This is not something we saw crop up in our data if you went back 3 to 5 years. But this has been in our top 10 for some time now. So this is a program to keep an eye on. It may be an opportunity to get into a new program. There's obviously a lot more information you'd want before you made that decision, but it's trending up very strongly. Now, one thing you should know is we do screen out programs that are very, very small. So in order to make this list, you have to have at least 100,000 searches. Then when we get past that, there's one other tech program here, HVAC maintenance, kind of the very other end of the spectrum from aerotech, aerospace technology, but nonetheless a tech profession. Interestingly, we only have 2 health programs that make the top 10, naturopathic medicine and rad tech. So not a lot of healthcare represented here in terms of total Google search volume. You'll see in later charts that in terms of enrollment and such, health has much stronger performance. Then we have a couple of others, not easily grouped or classified: economics and artificial intelligence, both over 50% growth. Little caveat on economics. Over the last 5 years, people have reclassified their traditional liberal arts economics program to bring it into this more quantitative world. And that's so that it qualifies as a STEM program, and that gets funding for a lot of schools. So you see that switch, the underlying volumes within economics, when you strip that out, or when you add both those programs together, much more like flat, but a huge growth in the STEM side of economics. Artificial intelligence, brand new, and growing very rapidly. My money says that this is going to be like cybersecurity, a small program that grows fast, gets big, and keeps growing fast. So this is really one to keep your eye on. If you haven't got this, you've really got to have a hard look and figure out how you get into this space. Hugely important, growing very quickly, and something your students need to be knowledgeable about in order to arrive prepared for the future workplace. They're going to be expected to know how to use AI when they go out to get a job. We'll talk about that more when we get to skills later on. Then we've got a couple in the design space, 3D modeling and fashion apparel design. Again, design's been cropping up recently. I don't recall it being popular before, so that's a new thing. And then I think that, education made the list: school counseling and early childhood education teaching. Now let's look at some other student demand indicators, namely enrollment. So we've moved from forward-looking indicators to things that are telling us about what's happening really right now, in this case last fall, but very current information on what people are actually enrolling in. At the certificate level, community college level, we're up. We had a couple of years there. We were up very substantially, 4 and 5%. Only 1% in fall 2025-26 at the community college level. So that growth is slowing down a bit. That varies tremendously state by state. When I looked at Massachusetts, it was up 20%. We recently offered a scholarship program that essentially pays for community college for anyone that can go. So again, very different statistics at a state level. Overall, though, we're at 1%. Which programs are growing? And here I mentioned that healthcare was going to come back and make a big showing. Here it is: medical assistant up 30%, phlebotomy up 14%, farm tech up 13%, nursing up 11% in enrollment. So 4 of our top 10 certificate programs are healthcare programs. Then we've got career and technical education with 3 programs: HVAC, carpentry, and auto mechanics, all up double digits. And a couple of others. General studies, typically going to be the beginning of a transfer process into a 4-year, criminal justice, and business operations support. Each of those up over 25%. General studies, the biggest growth at 55%. When we look at the associate level, again, you see healthcare running away with it. We've got 4 of our top 10 programs are healthcare at the associate level, 29% growth in allied health, 17% in rad tech, 12% in another flavor of rad tech. I'm sorry, this is radiation therapy, not radiation technology. Then we have the rad tech at 12% and ultrasound tech at 9%. We have 3 career and technical education programs: HVAC maintenance, firefighting, and construction site management. And then there are what are traditionally transfer programs that people enroll in a 2-year college and then go on to a 4-year college: natural sciences, physical sciences, and education general. Now let's take a look at the master's level, degree level. A little bit less of a good news story here. We're down 1%, more or less flat, really, but a little bit down, so it's not helpful. And that's after 2 years of reasonable growth, so that's a bit disappointing. My belief is that that's explained primarily by a drop in international enrollment. There's certainly been a drop of at least 50,000 students in that space. We'll come to more statistics about that in just a moment. At the bachelor's level, really flat year over year. The growth here has never been particularly spectacular. A couple of points up. Now we're down a point and basically flat this year. So nothing really exciting happening at the bachelor's level. What was growing in that context? Healthcare makes our list again: allied health and exercise physiology. Then we have 3 engineering programs: electrical engineering, civil engineering, and mechanical engineering, up about 10% to 14%. And as we look at business and finance, it makes two slots, 14% up for finance and 12% for business analytics. And in general, that analytics word is very popular in programs right now, whether it's business analytics, other sorts of AI-related, machine learning AI, not large language model, but analytical AI, quite popular. Political science makes our list, which surprises me. Then we have neuroscience, and here we have our aviation again, up 8%. So at the bachelor's level, this is a potentially important and growing program. What's going on at the master's level? Well, architecture programs rose 13% year over year. We've got a couple of other things that don't group well, biomed, biology, so two sciences programs up 7 and 8% respectively. Financial analytics, I mentioned keep an eye on anything with analytics in it, up 7%. And then we've got our healthcare guys coming in strong. Applied behavior analysis, family practice nursing, social work, and mental health counseling. So where is the growth in all this? Everything looks flat, but actually that masks a very fast-growing sector. And the first time I saw this, it really was a mind bender. I looked at the chart and it said, students under 18 are becoming a large segment in college. I'm like, wait a second. How many students are there that can really go to college before they're 18? And finally unraveled that was dual enrollment. So these are all the kids in high school taking college-level courses. This is a very fast-growing segment, up from 5% of enrollment to 12% over the last 10 years. And we're now up at almost 2 million students dual enrolled in the United States. So if you're not thinking about actively courting this dual enrollment segment, you're missing one of the faster growing areas in higher ed. I also think it is a marketing platform. If you can find a way into the dual enrollment market, it's a way of getting in front of students early in their academic career and influencing which college they choose. I have an idea for how to do that too, and this is a bit salesy, but I'll do it anyway. And that is, we have a tutor, an AI tutor that you could offer to students, and with that, put your brand in front of them on that tutor when they're studying. I think it could be very powerful. Many of these students probably need a little bit of help from time to time, and of course, being AI, the tutor's available 24/7. And it's custom for the course materials that you create. So it's just a way of getting your brand in front of what's a very fast-growing sector. More important, though, is if you don't have a strategy for reaching these dual-enrolled students, you're missing one of the faster-growing areas in higher ed. You're also missing an on-ramp to your college that could be available to you for these students. And last but not least, remember, these are the people who are capable of taking college courses in high school. So it's a very attractive segment in terms of their educational ability. Now let's flip over and look at international. No surprise here. The news isn't good. Our international page views are down 36% year over year. At the bachelor's level, they were basically flat when we exclude China. Masters fell 53% and PhD levels search volumes fell 51%. And that's why I mentioned earlier that in all likelihood, the drop we saw in master's degrees almost entirely international students. Now, why did I exclude China? A year ago, our data source didn't have China. So if we compare year over year and we don't exclude China, we're giving an unrealistic estimate of the change. Another few months, we'll have year over year statistics. We don't have them yet. You can see that's very important because China is the largest country by far in terms of page views, with almost 61,000 page views. Second is Hong Kong. China said a different way. And then you see Singapore, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. I'm always surprised by the names, on this list. Nepal's actually dropped. It was number 2 at one point. It's dropped all the way down to number 10. Nigeria is a persistent entrant here. And the rest has been moving around. India's usually on the chart, but not as prominent as this. And Brazil is a new entrant. I have not seen them on this chart before. So their share of page views, their interest in going to school in the US is going up. Now, what programs are people looking for, international students in particular? I'm not surprised to see engineering on the bachelor side. That's kind of what you would think of as a bread and butter program for international students. But their interests are much more eclectic than that. In fact, we've got business, linguistics, biology, electrical and computer engineering, psychology, accounting, finance, music performance, not one I would have expected. And finally, civil engineering, again, kind of fits a stereotype, but it's in 10th place. So it is not, engineering isn't quite as dominant as I think many of us may think when we think of foreign students. At the master's level, I want to point out we do have some things growing here. Last month, none of the master's programs were growing. So this is good news. Financial analytics up 56%. Again, that analytics word is hot. Organizational leadership, animation, video graphics, public policy analysis, psychology general, all up over 10%. Then we have some things that are growing, but more slowly, digital marketing, sustainability studies, and legal. And the rest of all the hundreds of programs we analyze are all declining to one degree or another. The slowest decliners are chemical engineering and logistics. So not great news in international. I don't think that's a surprise. The depth of the fall, I think, is very concerning. This is literally, I did a rough estimate, $4 billion in higher education revenue if enrollment, in fact, declines by 36%. Now let's take a look at what's going on in the job market. January was up 12% in terms of job postings in our database. That's pretty consistent with what the Fed said as well. So the job market, which you can see last year was down every year, 2024 versus 25 every month. With this an exception, then it started sliding again. So up with 12% is really a big change. We'll have to wait and see whether that persists as we go further into the year. Every so often we get one of these 1 month blips. You can see the 12% here, and there's a 20% blip up here in September as well. And then it returned to form. So we'll see. Remember that the economy getting better is not good for higher ed. I mentioned the change in the unemployment rate. So this is, well, I'm glad the economy's maybe getting better. It's not a good sign for enrollment. Now let's take a look at the fastest growing job postings year over year. Physical therapist, number one, health taking 3 of the top 10 slots. In the federal data, they said that the primary area growing in terms of employment in the United States was healthcare. That fits our data here pretty well. Our top three of our top 10 slots going to healthcare programs, not programs, but jobs, nursing assistants, LPN, and physical therapists. Trades, pretty popular on the list as well. Heavy-duty truck drivers, security guards, production workers, and supervisors of production workers, and automotive techs. I used to do a lot of work in and around automotive tech and trucking in terms of education. I must say I anticipated that we'd be automated trucking much sooner than we have. And I think the risk of that damaging employment probably still several years out, not because the technology isn't here, though it's not completely clear where it stands, but the regulatory environment's really difficult. If you want to do cross-country trucking, you've got to get 50 states to agree that that's legal. And they certainly haven't agreed on that yet. So the regulatory part of that is going to slow it down. Who knows how long, 5 to 10 years before we really see a high volume of automated truck driving down the need for truck drivers themselves. Then we have industrial engineering up 137%, not bad. And preschool teachers except special education up 26%. I'm sorry. I've got everything now. Okay. Now, which skills do people need? I mentioned this earlier. This is why I said it. The prevalence of, or the existence of artificial intelligence as a skill required in job postings is up 164% year over year. So this is really important in terms of what students need to learn. They need to be good users of artificial intelligence. They need to understand the ethical barriers. They also need to know how to write a prompt effectively and need to know how to check the outputs because artificial intelligence does make stuff up from time to time. So this is a very important and growing skill. The growth may slow a little bit. I don't see this slowing, really. It'll be growing for a long time, let me put it that way, maybe at less than 164%, but still growing. Then interestingly, executive leadership, 113% growth. And then in the other operations and business areas, operational excellence, scalability, and automation. And if I went back a couple of charts, you could begin to see the reshoring, potentially the interest in manufacturing starting to flow through this information. Also, some of this is going to be applicable to building out your AI data centers. Some more traditional things that we had been doing less in the United States do seem to be cropping back up again in terms of skill demand. Then we have a series of other things, storytelling, occupational therapy, electrical engineering, and tooling, again, with that automation trend. And then I think many folks have told you that software and technology are dead, and that software developers are not needed. I believe that's just false. And you can see 81% growth in the demand for Python specifically. And of course, this AI has a software component to it as well. Although I want to point out that there's a lot of work that can be done in AI by liberal arts majors because prompt engineering is fundamentally writing correctly and clearly. It does not require you to code, although having some coding skills is a plus. But the woman who built one of our AI systems is an anthropology major, not a software developer. Though she's learning to do some software now. But the key skills were being able to give a command to AI and then observe the behaviors of the AI and then figure out, given those behaviors, how to modify the prompt so that the AI would do what you wanted it to do. It takes a long time to make the AI behave. So there's a real opportunity in AI for people who are not super technical. Sure, why? Give me 1 second here. There we go. Sorry, my charts weren't advancing. Alumni career paths, what are people doing? So these are, okay. First, this is the volume of people employed by occupation in our alumni database. So what we have are 30 million college graduates. And this is what college graduates end up doing. And it's really, I have never seen this data before today. Most people who graduate from college end up in management jobs by the millions, general and operations managers, marketing managers, managers other, project management specialists, sales managers, advertising managers, architectural and engineering managers, financial managers. So if you think about what people are going to do with a college degree, an awful lot of that is management. And it speaks to the diversity of skills they might need, the importance of people and communication skills. So keep that in mind as we talk about what kinds of people and what kinds of education we need in the future. An awful lot of it's going to be in these categories. And I would argue with the advent of AI that these are the jobs that stick, where you have to manage people, or for that matter, manage AI. Some of the more detailed skills jobs are going to be automated. But you can see computer occupations, all other, very large, and software developers, very large as well. So let's now talk about a program of the month. In this case, we're talking about physics. So of the top 10 programs, bachelor's level, national level in the US, physics actually makes the list. I was a little bit surprised. I would have expected it to be further down. It's actually in the 98th percentile overall in our scoring systems. It's a 96th percentile score in student demand and a 95th percentile score in employment. And last but not least, competitive intensity, 90th percentile. So not bad there either. You put all that together and you end up with a 98th percentile overall score. A couple things to notice about this too. First, those are percentiles. And they're percentiles that compare each program with over 1,500 other programs that we have in our database for the particular market you've selected. We do that because the data otherwise very hard to interpret. You know, if there are 1,000 Google searches in Topeka, I don't know if that's a lot or little for Topeka. But if I know that it's a 98th percentile in Topeka, then I know, yeah, that's one of the top programs in Topeka in terms of student demand. So that's why we percentile everything. Then we get to the colors. Why do we color code it? Well, I'm a history major. And when I have to look at a table of numbers, my eyes glaze over. But if I can look at it and see that they're all green, literally at a glance, I can know that this is a pretty good program, might be worth looking at in more depth. And if it's all pink, I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time on it. So let's take a look. Now we're talking about student demand for physics. And we can see our Google search volumes are healthy. They're in the 93rd percentile. New student enrollment volume is 96th percentile, and the on-ground and online completions are at the 96th percentile. So very healthy overall size of program. And to complement that, international demand for this program is very high. Actually, it's a 98th percentile. So it's a big program domestically, and it attracts students internationally as well. Then you want to say, well, is it going up or down? And actually, Google says it's going up. It's at the 73rd percentile, up 22% year over year, very healthy growth rate. And new student enrollment is up 4%, a little bit above average there at the 61st percentile. So now we get to an interesting point. Completion volume is down 9%. So which number do you believe? Google search, new enrollment, or completions? I think I can explain that. If you think about Google completion volume, which is based on iPad's completions, you have a fundamental problem. The most recent iPads data is from 2023. God knows if we'll even have iPads as we move forward, but the most recent data I suggested that maybe we will. But in any case, it's always a couple of years behind. Then you say, well, the student actually chose their major several years before they graduated, let's say 3 years before they graduated. So really what iPads is showing you is the trend in student demand back in 2020, maybe even 2019. So essentially we're still living with COVID impact. So that number is very out of date. Now, so what I would say is, yes, there was a decline in demand for physics 3 to 5 years ago. New student enrollment this fall was healthy and up. If I look forward using Google, people are interested in, going into a program. They're looking for a program, searching for it on Google. That's actually up a lot. So I'd be very careful if you're trying to understand trends with data from iPads. It's just plain out of date. iPads is still a good source when you're thinking about how many total students are in a program. It is not a good source when you're trying to understand trends. For that, you need more current data. Student enrollment is probably the most robust database. Google search is, again, forward-looking, much more volatile. So it's, the stable 97% of students are in it. Data is new student enrollment.
Really fast, Bob. The comment in the chat says the SIPSOC crosswalk for history majors would have misclassified you. As a history major yourself, can you expand on that a little bit?
We'll actually do that in just 1 second. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about that till the cows come home. So I don't think people understand how bad typical labor market data is. It's really bad. And I'll give you three numbers to remember, and then I'll talk about it in more depth in just a second. 5, 100, 500,000. So think about those three numbers: 5, 100, 500,000. And I'll explain how those relate to labor market data in just a moment. So job postings for physics majors, pretty robust, 96th percentile. That's kind of surprising. I mean, how many physics jobs are there? BLS current employment, 96th percentile. Same kind of question. Job openings, very healthy, 96th percentile. How can that be? So let's come back to that in just a second. I'll explain. BLS 1-year growth up 2%, 3-year growth up 3%. So it's growing at a low end. It's 26th percentile. So there are many occupations growing more rapidly than that, but still it's growing. And job postings per graduate, 1.5. That's right, a little above average at 67th percentile. So it's moderately healthy, I would say. Nursing's a 4 to 7 multiple. So that's, if you want to know what it looks like when you're a shortage, that's the kinds of numbers you would see. Wages are good, 25th percentile wage. Now, I'm going to confuse you here a little bit. People who are earning at the 25th percentile who have physics degrees make $62,000. That's pretty good. That's better than 76% of other programs. The post-entry bachelor's median wage is $93,000. So 3 years after someone's graduated, the median income is about $93,000. Now, you might think that physics is kind of an abstract thing and there are no jobs and so forth. The data says that's not so true. And why isn't it true? This is the percentage in direct prep jobs. So you're asking about history majors. Well, physics majors have a similar issue. There are no jobs in physics. And 98% of people who have a major in physics will go on to do something for which they are not directly prepared, i.e., they will not become physicists. And that's true for history majors as well. History majors do not become historians. We do not become museum guides either, which is what it says. So if we look at this kind of direct prep crosswalk is what we call it. A person studies physics, they go on and work in physics. Well, the underlying crosswalk, that is a alignment between academic programs and jobs, or SIPs and SOCs, is derived from NCES typically. And right on the NCES website, it says this crosswalk is not based on empirical data. You might ask, what is it based on? The opinions of a handful of guys sitting in a room who said, if you're a physics major, you can become a teacher, a natural sciences manager, a physicist, or a physics teacher in college. Well, you might well ask yourself, how well did those guys do? Did they really get it right in terms of what people with a physics major go do in life? Well, let's just say instead of 4 occupations, they go into 768 occupations. Okay, now I do a lot of this work, and if you're off by 10%, I can kind of wrap my head around that. And it's market data, it's messy, it's constantly changing. So, I'll give you plus or minus 10, and we're all in the ballpark together. But when you say 4 occupations and the real data says 768, you're off by 200x. That's a problem. And so I mentioned the 5, 100, 500,000. So the 100 is on average, the NCS crosswalk is off by 100 to 1 ratio between the number of jobs occupations they say people can go into, and the number of occupations they really go into. History majors go into over 470 different occupations, not the 6 that NCES says. By the way, also, when you look at this, you find they go into much more lucrative occupations than NCS says as well. So much of what you've heard over the years about how you can't get a job if you're a liberal arts major, or you can't make any money if you've had this major or that major, or philosophy major in particular, it's just not true. It's just counterfactual. Those folks go off and generally do fairly well. They earn about double what a high school graduate's going to earn. So there's a lot of misinformation floating around out there right now about this. If you need to know the facts, we have them. I'm happy to talk to you about it. And they're in our systems, and you can get them from there directly. But if there's almost no degree where people are going to go into less than 10 occupations. Might be out there somewhere. I don't know what it is. By and large, people are much more creative, and they go to a lot more different areas than you might anticipate. And here again, we see things like software development being something physics majors do, computer occupations, chief executives. Now, don't take too much stock in this. This includes all sorts of people you wouldn't think of, and I don't think of as chief executives. First of all, it's senior managers in firms. So an EVP in most companies will classify as a chief executive. It's also anybody who owns a business. So if somebody owns their own barbershop, they're classified as a chief executive as well. So keep that in mind when you see that large number. A lot of that are people who might be running a small professional practice and other small businesses. Then we have engineers, web developers, computer and information systems managers, architectural and engineering managers, project management, managers other, and marketing managers. So physics majors, like many people, become managers. They also do a lot of relatively technical jobs in and around computers and software. Now, let's talk about competition. Yes, this is a big program. There's lots of student demand, but it is not undiscovered. There are 656 campuses in the U.S. that offer physics. That puts it at the 2nd percentile. It's got more competition than 98% of other programs. We reverse that, just so you know. So our red coloring is always bad. So you can see that this is 2% here is a weak number. And campuses with grads, year-over-year change. This is how many colleges dropped physics, or the college itself went out of business. So we have 10 fewer than we had last year. And the median program completions, and this is a bit of a warning sign, are 6. So this is not a big program at most institutions. It's going to graduate about 6 students a year. And you figure that they're going to go through in 5 or 6 years. So that's somewhere between 30 and maybe 36 students in the program at any given time. National online institutions, we have a half dozen are trying to teach this online, 13% of all online institutions. And Google cost per click here is actually pretty reasonable. It's $1. That's at the 86th percentile, so it's a reasonably inexpensive program if you want to go out and try and attract students with cost per click advertising. And finally, national online completions, there aren't any. So that's something to keep in mind. This program has not gone online effectively in terms of being able to produce graduates yet. It's possible it could, but it hasn't. And then finally, we put it all together for you on one page. You might well ask, why in God's name do we create a page that's this busy? And it is a good question. And the answer is so you don't have to shuffle through a bunch of papers or screens in order to see all the information in one place. Once you get used to looking at this, it actually becomes very easy to understand and analyze. Though I will say, if you haven't looked at it before, it's a bit daunting. So again, you can see the colors. So I can look up here in the upper left. Just from the dark green color, I know this is a very highly rated program overall. Student demand, medium green, very good. Employment, medium green, very good. Competitive intensity, okay, at the 90th percentile in terms of that. So, I've got all green here. So I'm probably looking at a pretty good program. Then I can see my demand indicators have been over, all green. That's good. A little bit of a question mark we went through on change growth rates. I've got a big negative here. So when I do this, my eye goes to the greens, and then it goes to the warning signs where, anything that's pink, I'll take a look at and say, do I have something here I need to be worried about? And we do have a couple of things that we didn't talk about. We keep track of enrollment and completions by degree levels, so you can see what the most common degree levels are for this particular program. And then here's an interesting caveat. I mentioned just eyeballing and looking for the reds. Average cost per student credit hour for this program is 1.73 times the norm. So this is 75% more expensive to teach than the average program. So this is an expensive program to have. And the reason for that, I believe, is because it's small. And it's very difficult to run a program cost effectively if it's small. By the way, I did not say that it's losing money. I doubt it actually loses money. It's just expensive to teach. Now, given that we give you that really complicated set of numbers, you might be happy to know that we also, with a push of a button, can give you a written summary of that scorecard. It takes about 60 seconds in our systems. You request it, and it drafts in real time a summary of the most current data for you, as you can see in this particular example, all on a page, so you can have a look at it. And for those of you who don't want to read all those numbers and look at all the colors, this is a way to assemble and consume the information. It's a little bit more user-friendly. So let me summarize. In 2025, trailing 12 months, Google searches for academic programs were flat year over year. That's a little deceptive because they were up 21% through May. Then they dropped 13% in June through December, probably because of a shift to AI search away from keyword searches. From 21 to 25, aviation aeroscience grew the most on average. That's a program to really keep in mind, that and AI. Neonatal nursing cost per click grew the most during that same period. In fall 2025, new enrollment at community colleges rose 1% year over year. Bachelors and masters in aggregate fell 1%. You remember bachelors were basically flat at 0.3%. Masters were down a percentage point. At the certificate level, general studies grew most quickly. Allied health was really fast growing. Architecture was also fast growing. And in terms of jobs, physical therapist was the fastest growing occupation in the United States. That's because of all the old people like me who've got one thing or another that's wrong with them that they need to get therapy for. So I expect those healthcare jobs, particularly healthcare jobs that have to do with the aging population, are going to continue to be a source of growth. And then we looked at physics, which I wouldn't expect to be a really in-demand program, but actually it's pretty good. And remember that there are jobs for physics graduates because they're usually not going to become physicists. And according to the alumni data, the highest volume job for physics majors is actually software development. So for those of you who made it this far, the normal part of our webinar is done. What I'd love to do is hand it over to Marianne, and we'll show you some stuff we're cooking up in the kitchen, and welcome you to stay on, but don't feel like you have to, but I think you'll find it fun to see. This is our newest stuff that we're doing with AI for tutoring. And I'll stop there. Marianne, you all ready?
I am. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to play a little video here for you. and it just gives you a little taste. We had a wonderful, wonderful webinar just last week that we showcased some of these things. And this is just a little snippet that I think you're really gonna get a kick out of and enjoy. So if everyone can see my screen, I'm gonna go ahead and get the video playing.
One of our most innovative features for the student is the immersive study mode. This allows for a low latency voice-to-voice conversation with CoCo, where I can even share my webcam or my screen for live feedback. And I can communicate with it in different languages should I wish to do so. So now I'm going to quickly open the immersive study mode. I'm going to quickly communicate with CoCo. I'm going to speak in Japanese. I'm going to say, my homework is really difficult. Can you please help me? And then I'm just going to show a quick example working through a math problem of how a student could potentially use this for their tutoring sessions. So hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. How can I help you today?
私の宿題は本当に難しいですよ。助けてお願いしますか。
宿題が難しいですね。どの科目が難しいですか？具体的にどの問題で困っていますか？一緒に見ていきましょ
Well, let's switch back to English. I'm actually working through a math problem right now, and I really need some help. I think it involves factoring, so I was wondering if you could please help me try to work through this, because I'm really confused.
う. Sure, I can help with that. The problem you have on the screen, x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 0, looks like it can be factored. Do you remember how to factor a quadratic expression?
I really don't.
No problem. Factoring this type of expression involves finding two numbers that multiply to the constant term, which is 4 here, and add to the coefficient of the middle term, which is also 4. Can you think of two numbers that do that?
It's too confusing. Can you just give me the answer?
I know it can seem confusing, but we can figure it out together. Let's think about numbers that multiply to 4. We have 1 and 4, and 2 and 2. Now, which of those pairs adds to 4?
Oh, okay. Is it 2 and 2?
That's exactly right. Since 2 times 2 is 4, and 2 plus 2 is 4, you can factor the expression. How would you write that in factored form?
So if I'm remembering correctly, is it x plus 2 squared equals 0?
You got it. X plus 2 squared equals 0 is the correct factored form. Now, how do you find the value of x from there?
And then I think now I need to subtract. So x equals -2. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Setting x plus 2 equals 0 gives you the solution x equals -2. Great job.
And we are back.
So great, lots of good questions that I'm answering as we speak. David, you mentioned that you're concerned that people are closing programs based on incorrect SIPSOC crosswalks. That is a huge issue. If you're looking at any program in the liberal arts, the traditional SIPSOC crosswalk, that NCS crosswalk I mentioned, really is going to show you 4 to maybe 10 occupations. And they're all going to be lousy, by the way. History majors are supposed to become museum guides. It's like, we just don't. That's just not true. The number one thing that history majors become is lawyers. 15% of history majors become lawyers. That's not even on the list in the NCS crosswalk. So if you're deciding what programs to start, stop, or grow using an NCS-based crosswalk, if you're using any traditional labor data supplier, that is very bad data. Now, I should come back and finish out in the same vein that 5, 100, 500,000. So the first problem is 5. That's people use iPads data for this, and it's 5 years out of date. There is data that's 5 times more current, and that is the enrollment data. So first mistake is whatever information you have of what students are taking is really old if you're using iPads. I mentioned 100. That's 100 times more occupations in a fact-based crosswalk there are in an NCS-based crosswalk. So your information about what jobs are available is off by a factor of 100. That's not a small number. And then there's 500,000. You might wonder, well, what 500,000? And that is when most people who do this analysis rely on iPads reporting of the location of students. Unfortunately, iPads reports online students in the market in which the headquarters location of their institution. So University of Phoenix students, all 25,000, I believe, those completions show up in Phoenix. 95% of University of Phoenix students are not in Arizona. They're someplace else. So we go through a bunch of work using NC-SARA data to move those students back in the markets where they really belong, where they're studying, where they live. So that's the 500,000 error. It's 500,000 people who show up in the wrong location. That means if you're in Phoenix, you've got a wild overestimate of the number of graduates in your market. By the way, probably great for the city of Phoenix because it looks as though they got all these people with graduate degrees and so forth that are in Phoenix. When employers come looking, the data all looks terrific, except those people aren't actually there. And in many other markets, it understates the number of people with a given degree because it doesn't correctly understand which ones have completed an online degree from a school out of state. The students in Massachusetts are going to SNHU, show up in New Hampshire. So keep that in mind. If you're using any of the traditional labor data suppliers, they're off by 5, 100, and 500,000. So, but we're not. So if you need good data, give us a call. I hope all of you enjoyed the webinar. I'll sign off for today and keep CoCo in mind for all those students who arrive at college ill-prepared for college work. There is help for them, and it's extremely cost-effective.